Hi guys, we're on Warfare, and this is the 150k view special, The Life of Catelyn Stark. Before we begin, sorry if I sound off, I have my retainers in, so I might sound off here. Thanks so much for 150k views, and let's continue the Life of series. It's been a while, onto the video. So, we don't actually have a confirmed age for Catelyn in this show. It's estimated that she's around 40 years old by season 1, meaning she was born around 257 to 258 AC. Catelyn was born at Tully, the eldest of Lord Hoster Tully and Lady Minisa Went's 3 children. Catelyn had 2 siblings growing up, a little sister named Lysa and a younger brother, Edmure. Catelyn didn't really know her mother that well, as her mother died in childbirth sometime between the 260s to early 270s AC, where there isn't a really confirmed date here. This made Catelyn the Lady of Riverrun, as Hoster Tully never remarried. This meant that Catelyn would be present when various lords visited her father, and when her father went to visit various lords. Something I should mention is that around this time, Hoster Tully took Peter Baelish, or his more commonly known name as Littlefinger, to ward. Throughout growing up, Catelyn and Lysa would practice kissing with Littlefinger. Yeah, that's pretty fucking weird, although not as weird as Aemon kissing his mom in House of the Dragon Season 3, Episode 1, but I'm going to ignore that ever happened. Sometime between 276 to 277 AC, Catelyn was betrothed to Brandon Stark. Brandon Stark is the heir to Winterfell. Catelyn was very pleased, and she fell in love with Brandon, and whenever he visited Riverrun, she loved him. They'd be engaged for roughly 4 to 5 years, and they were intended to marry in 281 AC. However, someone else had grown in love with Catelyn, Littlefinger. He wanted to marry Catelyn, so he challenged Brandon Stark to a duel for Catelyn. Naturally, Brandon won by a landslide. Brandon Stark wanted to kill Littlefinger, and should have killed Littlefinger, but Littlefinger was like a brother to Catelyn, so Catelyn begged him not to kill Littlefinger. Thus, Brandon didn't execute Littlefinger, but it didn't stop Hoster Tully from immediately sending Littlefinger away back to his home in the Fingers, which was in the Vale. What Catelyn didn't know is that Lysa Tully, Catelyn's sister, had grown in love with Littlefinger. This is a weird love triangle. Lysa and Littlefinger ended up having sex the night after the duel, and Littlefinger thought it was Catelyn, but Lysa didn't correct him. Okay, well, I have so many questions right now, but this led Littlefinger to boast that he had taken both Catelyn and Lysa's maidenhoods, but no one believed him. As for Lysa, she would become pregnant with Littlefinger's child, but Hoster Tully forced her to terminate it. Anyway, back to Catelyn. Continuing in 281 AC, after the Great Tourney of Harrenhal, Brandon Stark and Catelyn Tully went back to Riverrun, as the intention was to marry them right after. However, this wedding would have happened, as Lyanna Stark would go missing, presumably kidnapped by Crown Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. Lyanna had been traveling with the wedding party towards Riverrun, and naturally, Brandon left Riverrun going to King's Landing, shouting for Rhaegar to come out and die, and demanding the release of his sister. Naturally, this is a one-way ticket to getting arrested, and you could say it was treason, but Brandon was arrested, and when Lord Rickard Stark was called to answer for the crimes of Brandon, he demanded a trial by combat, which the Mad King Aerys honored by burning both alive, killing Lord Rickard Stark and Brandon Stark, which started Robert's Rebellion. Brandon Stark, Catelyn's betrothed, was dead. Catelyn was completely distraught, and with this news, and according to Catelyn herself, locked herself in her room, refusing to eat or come out for several days. It wasn't until Hoster Tully reminded Catelyn of her duty as a Tully. Catelyn agreed to do her duty, and she'd be betrothed to the new Lord of Winterfell, Ned Stark, Brandon's younger brother. I made a video on the wedding of Ned and Catelyn, which I'm showing the thumbnail right now on screen, so go watch that. Anyways, after the Battle of the Bells, Ned Stark and Catelyn Tully would be married in 281 AC. Catelyn Tully would become Catelyn Stark. Catelyn and Ned didn't spend long together, only a fortnight, as Ned had to go back to war in Robert's Rebellion. However, during this time, Catelyn became pregnant with her and Ned's first child. I can't talk. Catelyn spent the majority of her pregnancy waiting for news from Robert's Rebellion, worrying if her child would grow up at all, or without a father, or with a father. Eventually the Targaryens were defeated, and Robert Baratheon and Ned Stark returned. Catelyn and Ned's first child would be a son, Robb Stark. When Ned returned to Riverrun to bring Catelyn and his newborn son Robb back to Winterfell, or should I say back to Winterfell, more like to Winterfell, Ned was ashamed and couldn't meet Catelyn's eyes because in Ned's hands was Ned's bastard son, Jon Snow. Catelyn would hate Jon throughout Jon's time at Winterfell growing up, and for the simple reason that Ned slept with another woman. Really petty, if you ask me. In reality, what Ned never told Catelyn is that Jon Snow wasn't Ned's bastard son. He was the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, Ned's sister. His true name was Aegon Targaryen, and Ned hid the truth from Catelyn because he didn't trust her with the truth. Catelyn described herself as being scared when she first went to Winterfell, but naturally, over the next 8 years, Ned and Catelyn lived peacefully in Winterfell. During this time, they would have 3 more children. Born in 285 AC was a girl, Sansa Stark. In 287 AC, another girl, Arya Stark. In 288 AC, the couple's second son and 4th child, Bran Stark. Then in 289 AC, Greyjoy's rebellion broke out. Ned went off to war again, and Catelyn didn't want him bringing home another child. The Iron Throne won Greyjoy's rebellion, crushing the Greyjoys. However, when Ned returned home, he brought Theon Greyjoy home to raise with his kids as a hostage to keep Balon Greyjoy, Theon's father, in line. Catelyn never trusted Theon, and it was kind of like how she didn't trust Jon Snow. 3 years after Greyjoy's rebellion, Catelyn and Ned welcomed their final child, another son, which Ned named Rickon Stark after Ned's father. This brings us to the events of Game of Thrones. In Season 1, Jon Arryn died in 297 AC. Catelyn begged Ned to stay in Winterfell and refused King Robert Baratheon's offer to betroth Sansa to Joffrey and make Ned Stark the Hand of the King. Ned accepted and, I don't know why I sighed there, and wanted to investigate the death of Jon Arryn, as Lysa Arryn, Catelyn's sister, had sent word to Ned and Catelyn's claiming it was the Lannisters who murdered Jon Arryn. Ned went south with Robert, and he brought Catelyn's daughters, Sansa and Arya. As for Jon Snow, he joined the Night's Watch. When everyone was leaving, Bran fell from a tower, breaking his legs and going into pretty much coma. Catelyn was distraught and spent days in Bran's room. Ned arrived in King's Landing in 298 AC and would discover later on that Robert's kids weren't actually the kids of Robert. They were the kids of Cersei and Jaime Lannister, but I'll get back to that. Back in Winterfell, Littlefinger had secretly sent an assassin to kill Bran in the night, framing the Lannisters, as he wanted to cause chaos and a war between the Starks and Lannisters. Catelyn and Bran's direwolf Summer would kill the assassin. Naturally, Catelyn and all those in Winterfell suspected the Lannisters of pushing Bran from the tower and trying to kill him. Bran would wake up, but he didn't remember what had happened, and by that point Catelyn was out of Winterfell. She had gone to King's Landing to tell Ned of their suspicions. Catelyn had one last goodbye with Ned, and she went up the King's Road where she would run into Tyrion Lannister. While in King's Landing, Littlefinger had told Catelyn that the man who killed Jon Arryn and sent the assassin to kill Bran was Tyrion. Catelyn didn't think twice about believing Littlefinger's bullshit story if she thought for one moment maybe the War of the Five Kings might not have happened. She would capture Tyrion Lannister and take him to the Vale, the location of her sister Lysa Arryn, to face trial and presumably justice. This would have major consequences, as Ned Stark was trying to leave King's Landing when word broke out of Tyrion's arrest, and Jaime Lannister attacked Ned in the streets of King's Landing, breaking his leg and keeping Ned trapped in King's Landing. Back in the Vale, Catelyn and Lysa would make Tyrion face his trial by combat, which Tyrion's champion Bronn won, proving Tyrion's innocent, but by then, the damage was already done. Robert Baratheon was dead, and Joffrey followed Robert as king. And Ned Stark would try to launch a coup against Joffrey and Cersei, only for Littlefinger to betray Ned, and Ned was arrested. This led to Robb Stark and the North declaring war on the Iron Throne, starting the War of the Five Kings. Catelyn tried to get the Vale on the side of the North, but Lysa would not join them. She then negotiated with Walder Frey to allow the Northern Army to cross the Twins in exchange for Robb Stark to marry a Frey. This pact was agreed by both sides, and Robb would eventually capture Jaime Lannister, but it was too late. Catelyn's husband, the man she loved, the father of her children, Ned Stark, would be executed in King's Landing in 298 AC, and Robb Stark was crowned king in the north. This leads into 299 AC, or Season 2. Catelyn tried to persuade Robb against sending Theon Greyjoy back to the Iron Islands to negotiate an alliance with Balon Greyjoy, but Catelyn knew that Balon would never align with them, but Robb refused to listen. He then sent Theon home, and Catelyn to negotiate with Renly Baratheon for an alliance. Catelyn did get an alliance with Renly secured, only for Stannis to kill Renly with Shadow Baby. Bro. Well, that didn't work out so well, did it? And Catelyn fled Storm's End while taking Brienne of Tarth into her service. When Catelyn came back, the news of Winterfell's fall to Theon Greyjoy had arrived. She rightfully criticized Robb for his blunder, and however, what both of them didn't see coming was that Theon faked Bran and Rickon's deaths after Bran and Rickon escaped thanks to the wildling Osha and Hodor. The grief would affect Robb and Catelyn differently and would ultimately cost them their lives. For Catelyn, she freed Jaime Lannister in exchange for Sansa and Arya to be returned. What she didn't know that Jaime was lying on his ass and had no intention to deliver Catelyn's daughters back, and Arya had escaped King's Landing during Ned's execution. As for Robb, he slept with Talisa and would end up marrying her. And despite Catelyn warning Robb against betraying Walder Frey, Robb didn't listen and married Talisa in 299 AC. These two actions would do Robb's war against the Lannisters. This leads into Season 3 or 300 AC of Game of Thrones, and the last year of the War of the Five Kings. The Freys, sorry if you can't hear me, the Freys turned against Robb, as did the Boltons, although no one knew about the Boltons at the time. Catelyn and Robb would learn of the sack of Winterfell, and Bran and Rickon were not found. Catelyn's father, meanwhile, whose Tertelli was sick for a couple of years now and would die of this sickness. Catelyn would be present at Hooster's funeral, and then Rickard Karstark would go and kill the last Lannister prisoners Robb had. This resulted in Robb Stark executing Rickard Karstark, and Robb also wanted to take Castle Rock and needed more men, so he renegotiated with the Freys. This time it would be Edmure Tully marrying a Frey in exchange for the full support of House Frey. Catelyn, like Robb, would learn that Talisa had become pregnant with Robb's child. Robb wanted to name the boy Eddard after his father. This wouldn't happen, as the wedding of Edmure Tully and Rosalind Frey of the twins is more known as the Red Wedding. The Freys and the Boltons betrayed Robb and Catelyn and House Stark. Talisa was first killed. Then Robb was killed as Catelyn watched Roose Bolton stab Robb to death before Catelyn herself was killed. All the while, Arya Stark would watch. Arya Stark would get revenge for her family, seeking out the Freys for revenge 4 years later and killing them. But that ends the life of Catelyn Stark. Thank you so much for 150k views. It feels insane to me that we got this far. Sorry this one took a really long time than normal, but we got there in the end. Not we, it's mostly my fault. As for who's next, it'll either be the life of Stannis Baratheon or the life of Lyanna Stark. Lyanna will only happen after my Robert's Rebellion miniseries is complete for the Game of Thrones 15-year anniversary. After the next special videos, the FNAF Timeline Part 2 is the next upload, and at 300k views, I'll do a video on the war that set up a Night of the Seven Kingdoms, the first Blackfire Rebellion, coming at 300k views. But until then, bye!